Morning, it's Jim. It's Friday. It's August the 30th. Day off today. Just been talking to my nephew a little bit. He's looking for a chainsaw and a little new at it. He was firefighting this summer and used some of their saws and kind of got onto it a bit. But I noticed when I was trying to help him get some information on the differences, and I was kind of encouraging him to look at like a Husky 372 or a 044 steel or a 046 steel, and he sent me an ad that he'd seen for a steel 271 or 291, and so then I suggested he look around at some of the videos out there to get a better idea what a pro saw is versus a consumer saws. Then I got looking around, and there's a lot of guys that make videos that don't really actually disassemble them or kind of get into the guts of them. So I want to do a little video and kind of show you guys some of the differences, and it might be a little bit long, but if you're looking for some help figuring some of this stuff out, hopefully I'll cover what you're looking for. So I'm gonna bring you in a little bit. I got a table full of both the Huskies on that side, starting with it's a Rancher, and then an X-torq, and then the traditional original version XP. So we'll go through the differences in some of those. And then on this side I got a Farm Boss, which is basically a consumer saw as well, guts of one, and then a 261, and just try and show you some of the differences on the steel side. So yeah, so we'll move in a little bit. I'm just gonna shut you down. Okay, it's early morning out here. Had to wait for the sun to come up. Actually, I was up at 4 this morning, wanted to do this kind of a video here for my nephew, but anyways, sun's up. Figured there's a little bit more room on the picnic table than in the shop. So here we are on the Husky side. This is a Rancher. It's a consumer saw. Little analogy for you. You may or may not like it, but guy I worked with, him and his wife were traveling Asia, and they'd landed in, I think it was Bangkok, Thailand, and they were walking back to the hotel after supper one night, and he kept getting approached by these girly boys, and apparently, and I don't know how he found out, but if you ever look under the hood, it's not what you think. And that's kind of like how these saws are. So Husqvarna, they've got basically 2 levels, and so does Stihl. You got a consumer saw that looks like a chainsaw, and it acts like a chainsaw to a point, but under the hood, it's not really designed the way the professional models are. So one of the ways you can distinguish that is if it starts with the 4 instead of a 3 or a 5. The 2 series get a little bit more complicated because a lot of them were pro saws and some aren't, but anyways, we'll stick to kind of some of the fairly recent stuff. So if it's a 400, here's what you're getting. This one normally comes with a spur sprocket. The pro saws will all have a rim drive, so basically instead of having this thing where your chain floats around on it a bit, the rim drive actually engages a lot better into the drivers on the chain, and then if it wears, you just replace the sprocket, and I'll show you a sprocket here in a little bit. But anyways, that's one thing. Then Husqvarna's gone to this X-torq style, and actually that injection system is on their Pro Series saws now as well. But basically what that is there's a little burst of straight air that goes into the combustion chamber after the basically after the spark plug's fired and burn the fuel that's in there. And so what they're trying to do is reduce their emissions. But what that does is having that straight air go in instead of the mixed fuel and air, it actually causes them to run a lot hotter, and they also don't get the lubrication as much up in the top there when they kind of need it. So that fuel vapor actually absorbs a lot of the heat and gives a lot of cooling. So these ones don't get that, and neither do the ProSaw 500 series or the 3 series that say X-torq on them. You'll hear people talking about clamshell design. I'm just going to pull this handlebar off. This also is not the traditional setup for a Pro Series saw. I just jammed this back on a minute ago. I don't know why it's hung up, but anyway, so with these ones, all this piece comes off, unlike a Pro Saw where your handlebar comes off, and that's that. So with these ones, it's a clamshell design. So basically, your cylinder splits right in the middle of the crankshaft itself, and then the guts of your saw is all plastic, other than this one little insert at the bottom that's aluminum, but all of this stuff is all plastic. Okay, so for maybe the average homeowner or somebody that cuts a load of firewood once a year, it'll work for you, I guess. Bounce around the back of pickup or something like that, maybe it's all right, but that's what you get. And then the thing that does is it doesn't give guys like me that want to improve the performance of them the opportunity that the Pro Saws, and this Pro Saw do, where your entire crankcase is aluminum magnesium, and it splits in the middle. Your crankshaft goes through that, and so does your connecting rod and piston mount onto that crankshaft there, and then your cylinder mounts onto that. And so we can manipulate basically the height of clearance for the piston when it gets to the top into the combustion chamber. And you always need a little bit of clearance, kind of a fingernail width or whatever, but if it's joined solid onto the crankshaft, then there's no way to manipulate that clearance. So that's the clamshell, and this is kind of the Pro Saw. So guess that pretty much beats most of that up. There are two different types of port systems in these as well. So this one's what they call an open port, and I'm not sure if you're going to totally be able to see it, but the piston, basically, as it rides along there, your fuel air comes in at the bottom and then up into the combustion chamber, and as the piston comes down, it creates a bit of pressure underneath in the crankcase, and therefore it displaces that mixture along these ports and then up past the piston into the combustion chamber. So a lot of the farm or rancher or consumer saws have this type of a setup, and so with that, again, you can't manipulate your port timing with that, or at least not very easily. So that's one of the other potential drawbacks to it. This piston, I think, was out of this guy, yeah. And I guess one of the other things I didn't bring out that could be discussed is the type of crank seals that these consumer saws use. Normally they're just a big hunk of rubber that goes on that crankshaft and everything drops into place. These are cheap and easy for them to make. A lot of these ones are actually made in China, and so it's plopped in and away it goes. And like it or not, they're more designed or intended to be basically a disposable saw, somebody's maybe first chainsaw, but that is kind of what it ends up being. Okay, get rid of some of this, I guess. Try not to. Okay, so then we've got two of the other kind of Pro Series Huskies here. So when I was where did I put it? There it is. Just talking about the X-torq. There's some easier ways to identify them. Usually the top cover that sits on this is a little bit higher than the older XP, just because this piston is quite a bit taller than a traditional piston is. Maybe I'll pull this. I think I got everything ready to lift off. Yeah, mostly. There we go. Okay. Just like magic. I wish disassembly was really that quick normally. Okay, so this is a traditional piston on the Husky, and this is the X-torq style. So you can see that piston's quite a bit longer. That also translates into the cylinder height itself being quite a bit taller as well to accommodate that. And what the reason for that is obviously for their strato-ports. That's what they call that. And so it's higher to have that system in there. The intake and everything is split, so there's straight air goes through separate from your mixed fuel and air. Oh, I guess straight air on top and mixed fuel and air is on the bottom, versus the traditional one that is just wide open. I don't know if we're gonna be able, yeah, there you go. I think that little ray of sunshine's coming through there. So that's just straight air and fuel going in. And what that does is it all goes into your crankcase and then all comes up through your closed port system. And try and manipulate this so I can get the light in there. Anyways, so it comes in around the side here, and it's totally separate from where your piston travels, basically. Okay. You'll see these transfer caps on the side of the X-torqs. That's another easy way to distinguish that. So the X-torq runs that split with the dose of fresh air going in after the combustion has occurred. And the reason for that was their way of trying to minimize the emissions. If your port timing and capacities aren't spot on, then there can be a little bit of your unburned mixed air and fuel traveling out into the muffler. But anyways, so that's some of that. The yeah, so this one's the 372 XP, unlike the X-torq. And some of the things the 372 X-torq and the XP share is that professional style aluminum or magnesium crankcase, and that it splits, that your crankshaft goes through between it and holds your piston and everything on, but that we can remove the cylinder. So Let's see, one of the other things I was thinking of is a lot of these X-torques have gone to that nylon caged crank bearing versus the steel caged ones. So if they're going to fail, normally that nylon, and especially if guys are over tightening your chains and stuff, it wrecks that. If the saws are running hot, that also ends up being a problem. And with the new 5 Series Huskies, which I don't have one of those on the table here, but they use the computer to meter their fuel, and so people like the idea of convenience, but trusting all your fuel metering versus learning how to do that yourself ends up creating its own problem, which basically is that those saws normally don't run enough fuel in their air fuel mixture, so they run very lean. That causes them to also run hot, causes a little bit less lubrication in the crankcase, and so one of the things a guy should be doing is running 40-to-1 mix with your fuel and oil. That helps ensure that you get a little bit more lubrication where you need it. And a lot of people hear the whole 50-to-1 thing. Basically that benefits 2 groups: your EPA, because they want to reduce your emissions, and that may or may not happen, and the other one is the big outfits selling saws that want to ensure that you're going to be coming back, because that saw isn't going to last forever like these old ones used to last forever. You could rebuild them a number of times. Usually there'd be little things that happen and bolts strip out or something like that, and you helicoil them and you're back in business, or you get an air leak somewhere with a hose that didn't like ethanol fuel or this or that, but end of the day you rebuild them and they're good to go again. That's what's going to happen with these ones. So probably got off on a tangent here, it's getting long, but anyway, that's most of the details, I think. But yeah, all your components on these are that same metal, not just plastic. So or at least on that side. This side, they're plastic too on the Huskies. Okay, maybe I'll shut this off here and then I'll do a separate one for the still. But it's quite a few similarities there too. Okay, thanks for tuning in.